Hello Naughty Steppers, back once again with a new EP review, and today's video is going to be on the latest release from Ray Volpe entitled No Emotion Allowed. Which is quite bemusing for one of the so-called sad boys of dubstep, but hey ho, there you go. Now Mr. Volpe is someone whose curve has been a steadily uphill one ever since the release of his Skull Island EP on Excision's Rotten Recordings back in 2015. Since then, he has released a couple of multi-track projects and a smattering of self-defining singles, one of which, Rescue Me, was one of my top 15 favourite originals of last year. Not to mention his dipping into the remix realm, where he has gone beyond his usual dubstep style to excel in the vocal trap method of production. With edits of tracks such as Runnin' and Birds being some of my undoubted favourites over the last few years. Also signing in the recent past to the Slayle label, who currently manage the likes of Sudden Death, AFK and Spock, as well as Mr. Volpe himself. Am I saying that right, Slayle, or is it Slivel, or, I thought it'd be one of those things where the V is an A, one of those ones. All the while garnering a huge and loyal online fan base thanks to his honest, genuine and matter-of-fact presence on social media. An artist whose music I have gone from absolutely loving to, in all honesty, being a little indifferent towards. There are those, in my opinion, game-changing tracks that he has to his name, but there's also a fair amount of stuff that, whilst different in sound, isn't too adventurous on the structure side of things. Not that this stopped me, however, from being very excited going into this 3-track EP. Volpe is someone who, in the past, has cited his technique of mixing happy and uplifting melodies with dark and heavy drops as his favourite way of making music. Something arguably most prevalent in his appropriately titled Bipolar EP from 2016. And that approach is undeniably present again here in No Emotion Allowed, as Volpe gives us a first-hand tour of his staple dubstep sound. Forgetting the fact that the Volpetron vocal sample is at the start of every track, the sounds alone are evidence enough that this is his EP. The screechy noises that are a fixture in his production have a say in all 3 songs, some to a lesser extent than others. We get the first instance of this in the opening seconds of the EP, with those high-pitched winding noises eschewing their way into the chugging bass line, creating a pleasantly disorientating effect. Becoming increasingly present in the track as the drop progresses, growing shinier and more blinding over time, while still being controlled very well. Drifting between being more drawn out and enduring to being more stabby, insistent and invasive somewhat. In the second track, Wet Napkin, the screeches play less of a significant part, finding their way in between those fantastic whip sounds that give this song such a bubbly and cartoony character. The screeches return in full force, however, on the final number, Rave Rage, with each one in the drop frazzling the listener more and more. Repeated through changes in tempo of the percussion and the frequency of the synths, only heightening that dizzying experience. Which is a welcomed one, I hasten to add. These moments stick out as mile and away the most noticeable things with these tracks in my opinion, because beyond these drops everything else is relatively simple. The sound design is very on point throughout, most clear arguably in those introductions, which are all incredibly gripping, animated and alive. The chugging bass line of the first, the string-plucked intro of the second, the video game theme that runs through the third, all painting their own vivid picture. Moreover, as mentioned previously, we have that intense interaction between the uplifting opening sequences and the darkness that follows. But there isn't anything that's making me think this stuff is necessarily beyond the ordinary or breaking boundaries in any sense. There seems to be a set format adhered to here without any venturing into the kind of territories that Volpe has gone into in his vocal trap songs. But, maybe this was his intention, to just put out a simple but effective trio of tracks that represent his sound well, and if that's the case, then this is a very solid EP. After all, he displays a real consistency here, whilst also giving a clear insight into his style for anyone that hasn't heard his stuff before. And I'm not saying that there isn't any experimentation to this EP, or brief little moments to give it that extra bit of spice. The laugh and grunt before the half drops in Showtime really captures the brutality of that moment, placed to perfection, and with so much menace behind it. Ah, so awesome! And the scuttling notes at the end of each drop sequence are creepy as hell, once again encapsulating the grisly nature of this track. I hope you could hear those, but yeah, that's the point in which they come in that track. Something I've also noticed that Volpe does extremely well is not tampering with the musicality of his introduction when it comes to his build-ups. Keeping one solid chord in preparation for the oncoming madness, something present in Wet Napkin, with those 8 opening notes being used repeatedly on top of a constant one-tone hum, and enhanced by the fuzzy underlying notes and repetition of the yo vocal sample, which keeps the track ticking along very nicely. And I discussed these very briefly, but those whipping notes in the drop, I must return to them as they are probably my favourite sound in the EP, with the light cymbal percussion working very well to envelop these sounds in a feathery and delicate coating. I touched briefly moreover on the introduction of Rave Rage, but I feel like I must readdress it as probably my favourite part of that track. Such a magnetising pull to those opening notes, with the breakbeat drum pattern lending a certain cinematic feel to the song overall. And I do really enjoy the relentlessness of those screeches, which are impossible to escape from. You're left with no real choice as to whether to like them or not. Not to mention the interesting vocal sample at the end, where Volpe shouts out some people and reinforces the idea that no emotion is allowed, even if you are a sad little dubstep kid. But overall, in spite of the bright and pretty aesthetic posed by Volpe here for the most part, these tracks have a serious weight and might to them, created almost entirely by those thudding percussive backdrops. But in saying that, there is a sameness delivered here in that respect that is hard to ignore as a big element of this EP. Resultantly, while the energy and vibrancy is there in abundance throughout, the similarity in structure and sound means that there isn't too much variation on show here. But as I said earlier, this may have just been the theme that Volpe was looking to portray, and if that's the case, then he has more than succeeded. Therefore, even though you're not going to be taken on a wholly different journey with each track on No Emotion Allowed, the consistency is there, and those are the sounds that dubstep lovers want to hear, so in that sense, it's a recommended listen. Now, in terms of my favourite from the EP, I think I'd have to go with the hilariously titled Wet Napkin. For me, it's the most well-rounded track, possessing the biggest contrast between introduction and drop, which is what Volpe is going for in the end. And in terms of recommendations, then, to be honest, I'd say that Ray Volpe's sound is so unique that you're not going to find someone who is exactly or even similar to him, but for someone who bears a bit of semblance, then I would probably go for Must Die. And so that is that for another review on the Nawtystep channel, this time on Ray Volpe's new EP, No Emotion Allowed. Thank you very much once again, and as always, for watching. Like this video, share it about, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so that you can be updated anytime that a new video is released on the Nawtystep channel. Moreover, leave a comment with your thoughts on No Emotion Allowed. What did you guys, the viewers, make of it? Next to my head, there should be some other dubstep reviews on this channel if you enjoyed this one. And don't forget to like and follow Nawtystep across all social media if you haven't already, with everything linked, including that sole recommendation, in the description box down below. And lastly guys, if it's naughty, then you know. So be sure, as always, to keep it naughty and stay safe. And I shall see you all in the next one. Peace out.